Hi, I'm Bruce Snell. Today we're going to go over our 30-hour base skills series, and we're looking at Part 1, Class 2, which is breaking through communication, lack of communication. What we also want to do is think about what we have talked about in Class 1 and the fear. And what you're going to see here is how the fear and all these barriers that we're eventually going to get to is going to connect, and we can't resolve one barrier without affecting the other barrier, and that's why they all have, and that's why as an organization we have to take into account all 4 barriers to quality. So when we're getting into this communication, you're going to see a lot of basically fear that we're going to be talking about that's going to have to do with the communication, and the communication has to do a lot with the fear. Let's look at now on your page 1 of your handout. If you look at that, it's the profile of change. It's really kind of interesting. We call it the profile of change or leadership. If you look at this, there under the chart, it'll have the existing way of doing business. And the existing way of doing business converts to the breaking through the 4 barriers to quality way of doing business. And then under the existing way, we're saying you have an informal, what we call and what we talked a lot about yesterday was an informal organizational structure, an informal way of doing business. Under the 4 barriers to quality, we're really having the formal way of doing business. And so we're going to compare the two, and we're going to look at the contrast from an informal to a formal. And if you look down there at the bottom, we're looking at a new day every day, and the converts to an awareness. So let's look at, under the informal, let's look at management. In an informal organization, we're saying the existing way of doing business, we're doing it with management. And this is what we were talking about the other day, and what you're going to hear a lot about throughout this whole series, is that in an informal organization, we're really having to manage the organization. Remember, we talked about the fear, and that's where we were saying the fear has a lot to do with not being able, in effect, to let go. So if you look at that, we're saying in an informal organization, we're more or less trying to manage the organization, converse to a formal organization, which we're saying here is leadership. So if you look at the two, in an informal organization, we are managing. In an informal organization, we are leading. And we're saying leadership, not necessarily with the boss or the folks at the top, but literally with your co-workers and with each base work center. And as we build on this, you'll understand what we're talking about. So in an informal organization, we have management. Formal organization, we have leadership. So if you look at this, we're now saying, let's go to number 2. Again, we have 2 is stand fast. Okay, an informal organization. Now remember, we have to keep thinking of how these 4 barriers are interrelated and are affecting this informal organizational structure. Okay, if we look at this, the stand fast, we're saying is what we talked about a lot was about a reactive organization. And when there's fear in an organization, we're looking at having a very reactive organization. And when we're saying reactive, in a sense, we're standing fast. For the fact is that we're not really going to jump out and make a decision or get out there where there's some room for exposure, whether positive or negative, it doesn't matter, because of that informal and what might come back in regards to my actions, because I'm not trusting the organization. So if we look at this, well, let's move over to a formal, and it says concession. So if you look at this, when there's a formal organization, we're able to have concession. Concession either yielding to change, or the concession is you or your employee or your department or your division or your marketing people have a better idea or some input that makes a lot of sense. We're able to take that input and deal with it and have a concession. Because in a formal organization, we're really trusting the organization. So the concession is, we have to have the leadership that in turn make the concession to change, or really accept change to happen. So if we look at, let's go back to number 3 here. Underneath it says, won't take a stand. In an informal organization, what you're going to see is that we're going to kind of address every issue, go back and forth, other than really what the deal or what's being asked. We won't take a stand because we're afraid of what's going to come back to us or come back to our department. So we're looking at, in an informal, won't take a stand. In a formal organization, you have commitment. And what we're saying there is that the commitment is that I'm able to make a commitment on a decision or on a deal point or what I've been asked, just for the fact is of the formal structure and the leadership and the concession to change and the acceptance. Because when you really start having concession, you start getting acceptance. Let's look at now number 4. Number 4 is chaos. We're saying that in an informal organization, it's chaos. Now, if you look at what does chaos mean? Chaos internally within an informal organization is really talking about all the things internally within the organization that are going wrong. Sometimes we hit it, sometimes we don't hit it, sometimes we're the hero, sometimes we're the goat. But what happens is that the chaos in an informal, because remember, in an informal, the systems aren't defined, the processes aren't defined, the people aren't involved, we're not managing, planning, scheduling, monitoring, other than from memory, or the fact that we do it occasionally. But the problem in an informal is that if my department, if I'm managing, planning, scheduling, and monitoring, and nobody else in the department is, then how good are my skills, and how good is what I'm doing in my department? So if you look at in an informal organization, there's a lot of chaos because we can't even begin to start fix things or look at things because none of the things are defined or they're informally defined. Let's look at consistency. If you really look at the difference of the chaos from the consistency, is that when you have a formal organization, and we'll talk about this more depth throughout this whole series, but the commitment basically the commitment promotes consistency because I'm committed to you. I'm going to be consistent in my actions. Now, everything that we're talking about here, believe it or not, will actually apply to in our personal lives. And think about our actions and our interactions. We're saying the consistency converts to chaos because of a formal organization. We have our systems, our processes, our steps, our base skills. So actually our actions and events internally within the organization are more consistent. And then when we have the leadership and the concession to change yielding, in effect, that's in itself starts promoting a consistency. Instead of one day, I'm really meeting with my manager and they're upset and what I did was fine. The next day, it's not. So that's inconsistency. And that's usually resolves out of chaos. If you look at number 5 now, number 5 is half-truths. It's really interesting on the half-truths. And people are going, you know, Bruce, what are they doing? Are they lying? No, they're not lying, but the half-truths, if you look at, we had talked about the half-truths in a sense, are kind of like a hidden agenda. And the hidden agenda is not necessarily that I'm doing anything bad or wrong, but the hidden agenda is that I want to keep my job. Last time I spoke up, last time I got involved, like you keep asking, is that all of a sudden now I've gotten in trouble or I put my job in jeopardy. So if you look at the half-truths, I'm really kind of telling you kind of what I feel is safe. Now on the other turn, remember the 1%. Remember the 1%, the negative employee that come heck or high water, they're going to do whatever they can to make everybody's life miserable. You'll never make that person happy internally within the organization, and that person is usually holding the organization hostage. If you look at that 1%, in effect, they basically affect with the same negative characteristics 5% that in turn affect 20% that might only have one of those. So in effect, this is where the manipulation, especially by the 1%, really starts running rapid. And that's where the double standards, hidden agendas, this pent-up frustration, and all these other things that start happening in the organization. So if you look at the half-truths on the other side, we're looking at truthful. Again, we have to keep looking at the 4 barriers. We have to remember the base values. We have to remember the consistency, because that's what we were talking the other day. The consistency promotes truth. And remember, if we have our process systems defined and we have our employees gaining knowledge or awareness and understanding in these base skills, that in itself starts promoting consistency. And the consistency can be as simple as you bring me a problem, I don't whip the tar out of you. I ask you, what can we do to fix it, instead of getting defending and justifying whatever that particular deal is. So let's go down now and look at number 6, which is suspicion. Now, when you're in this environment of an informal organization, that's what we're talking about, the suspicion, is that whatever you're saying to me or coming down the pike, I'm suspicious, meaning that I'm not really trusting what you're talking about. I'm looking at, is there a hidden agenda? Why are you here? Is there something that I've done? And anything, if you look at it, we're spending so much time other than good energy focused on what we should be doing because we're not really trusting what's coming down the pike. So we're suspicious in everything. So if you look at it, do you think that affects, because at home, because you can't just like a light switch turn it on and off. So what's happening at work, what's happening at home is affecting one another. And in an informal organization, we become trustful. What we're saying is that, remember what we talked about before, consistency promotes truth, that promotes trust. We trusting in what you're saying. We're trusting the fact that you're coming to our department, my job, my base work center, because you're there to do what's best for the organization and our customers, clients, and employees. It's not that the fact that you're coming here with a hidden agenda to either downsize, outsource, pin blame, or anything like that. So in effect, in a formal organization, we're starting the trust, the consistency, doing things the same way every day in both people and process, meaning that I'm leveled out, I am now talking under control, I have self-control, I'm not beating you up when you're bringing me an issue. So the consistency that starts promoting the truth, meaning that now the consistency of what you're doing is now what I'm saying is truth, then in turn I start trusting. So I really want you to think about these things on how they're related to one another, and I really want you to think about too, when you're driving in the car, think about these things and these actions that we're doing. The sad thing is that when I get out and I look at a lot of the stuff that we're doing, is that we're really just kind of beating our head up against a wall. And I found a lot of our people didn't understand why certain things in life were happening, and they kept reoccurring, they kept happening. And we say, especially, there's some folks that have a cloud that follows them, and they go from one tragedy to the next. If you look at now number 7 is demoralization, demoralizing, and motivating. We're saying that when we're looking at this informal organization, and that no matter what's happening, it's like we just keep basically loading this stuff up on us. We call it our sack of rocks. Not only do we have some that we're bringing from our childhood, our past employer, all the negative influences in our life, as well as the positive, but what happens, we discount the positives, we're soon to discount them, is that everything is demoralizing. No matter what, anything's happening internally within the organization, we're looking at it in a negative attitude. We're seeing the bad and not the good in it. And in fact, it becomes almost that woe is me attitude. If you're looking at the motivating, in a formal organization, it's motivating because, again, we have the consistency, the trust that promotes the truth, and then it becomes motivating, self-motivating, because now my actions I'm now a part of, everything is consistent within the organization, and so in effect it becomes self-motivating. I'm like that new employee that started with the company, that I am excited about coming to work. I want to do things. I'm excited about my job. And if you remember, we talked about, usually takes 8 or 9 months to beat the enthusiasm out of that employee to where all of a sudden they're kind of shutting down and they're just kind of stepping back doing business as usual. So if you look at, let's go to number 8, and it's firefighting. And what's kind of interesting, we've done a fire department, so talking to them guys about this was kind of interesting. If you look at the firefighting in an informal organization, Now step back and look at most of the meetings and interactions you have with your coworkers or your boss or with your customers are the fact that we've done something wrong internally, or there's some kind of a conflict between personnel departments or whatever. And the firefighting is the only time we're getting together is to put out something that we did wrong. In an informal organization, that's what you have. We line up and we address that fire of the day. And so if you look at number 8, messed everybody up. Look at the monitoring. When you have a formal organization, remember, we're talking formal organization in regards to building those 6 supports of quality, looking at the 4 barriers to quality, is that we have maintenance. And what we're saying there, oh, I'm sorry, I dropped down. We're monitoring is that instead of in a informal, we're firefighting, we are monitoring how we're doing business. We have the organization set up. We have a formal structure. We understand with the consistency, remember, that promotes truth, that promotes trust. So in effect, we're monitoring the organization. The organization events and actions aren't running us, we're running the organization. Also, too, through this transition from formal to or informal to formal, we're also learning these skills at every base work center. So it's not just like the management, but everybody through the organization. Because the only way you're going to change, improve continuously an organization, you have to give all the employees these base skills to help out. Let's look at number 9. It's reaction. In an informal organization, we call it reaction. And this is kind of what we talked about the other day. The other day we talked about, and today you'll see it, is that when there's the fear in there, is that you look at, we become a very reactive organization. And when we're talking about reactive, we're stepping back, we're just kind of letting everything play out, and then I'm waiting for you to tell me what I need to do. And then I go into companies, they're going, they don't do nothing until I absolutely go over there and show them and make them and tell them how to do it. It's interesting. I don't know how many of us got kids, but it's like you tell your young one to go in there and say, "Hey, I want you to go take a shower, take a shower and say, okay, I need you to get in the shower. I need you to turn it on. I need hot and cold water. I need you to get soap. I need you to use soap. I need you to wash your hair. I need you to dry off. I need you to comb your hair." This is really what we're talking about, is that if you look at it, when we have this reaction thing, is that everybody is reaction and reacting to the situation. So if you look at it, it's like as we're growing our children, giving them where they understand, but it takes time and reinforcement. Before too long, probably by the time they're 3rd year in the college, we don't have to tell them how to take a shower anymore. They kind of learn that. The same thing internally within the organization. So in effect, when it's reactive and an informal, we're just reacting to whatever the deal is. So there's no schedule. If I had something scheduled, I'm now reacting to your sense of urgency or your fire. And you know, another interesting thing that we talked about is that almost every fire or every issue internally within the organization that's dumped on me, somebody usually knew about what was happening weeks, months, days before that, but they're not managed, plan, schedule, and monitor. So now it becomes my sense of urgency. Now I have to throw out everything that I'm doing. Now see, this is what we're talking about in these 4 barriers to quality and moving from an informal to a formal organization. This ain't like working harder. This ain't like doing, it's like really what we're doing is settling down the organization, and we do one thing and we do it right, consistently. So we're saying reaction. The other one over on the formal side is maintenance. Because when you have a formal organization, formal systems and processes, we have the consistency, we have the leadership that promotes truth, that promotes trust, and all of a sudden we're able to maintenance the organization of managing, planning, scheduling, and monitoring our events and actions, our processing of our product and service. So if you look at, we're now over here where we're saying reacting, we're maintaining because we have a formal organization that we can maintenance. Informally, absolutely no way, because you're just really putting out fires every day. Let's now look at the number 10, which is a moving target. Now, what we're looking at, it's really kind of interesting. You're looking at moving target. If I speak up or do something, they're going to shoot me down here. But the moving target, in effect, is that we can never fix nothing internally in an organization in the informal, because the system is what we call, is not in a controlled state because it's not defined. So some days we hit it, some days we don't. So in effect it's a moving target. We cannot nail down why that thing's going wrong. So in an informal, it is really a moving target. One day it's on, one day it's off. How in the world do you fix it? We fix it one day and it goes to heck the next day. And number 10 across in the formal is accountability. Now, if you look at the accountability on the thing in a formal organization, because again, what we're saying is that in an accountability, I'm tired of hearing these guys that are doing these seminars, and I get these things across my desk every day that talks about make your employees responsible, make your employees accountable. Our employees want to be accountable. Our employees want a responsibility. We have to give them the responsibility. What they don't like is the accountability of convenience or the responsibility of convenience, meaning that, hey, I've got this deal here, I'm taking the credit, but all of a sudden it's a problem, I'm going to throw it over to you. So it is what we call a responsibility of convenience. When you have a formal organization, there is accountability. Because number one of the fear, I'm not afraid to step up and hold it accountable. I'm not attacking that individual or that department. And in an informal organization, when the systems and processes are starting to define, there is accountability. Without that, there's none. In the informal, on the moving target, we're just beating up whoever happens to be in the room. It doesn't matter, because that's kind of how we've evolved to be. Let's look at number 11, status quo. Now, we've all heard that before. Really, a status quo is doing business as usual. And man, I tell you, remember what we talked about, the 4 barriers. The longer the organization's been in business, the bigger it is, the more entrenched the 4 barriers are. So if you look at the status quo, why do we have status quo? Or those sacred cows, or whatever you want to call them, is the fact is that because of the fear, because of the informal organization, I can't suggest a new product, I can't suggest a new service, I can't improve how we're doing it. For the fact is, in an informal organization, it's short-lived. There's no way to do any improvement. So the status quo, it's safer. Remember what we talked about, the reactive, the fear cage. So it's easier just kind of stay here until that thing gets to be a fire, then we all jump on that thing and start putting it out. So across from that is improvement. When you get into these large organizations especially, is that you look at the status quo, is that we spend more time focusing on how to stay out of trouble and how to please the guy that we're answering to than doing our job and doing and improving the organization. The improvement in a formal organization comes as we build the processes, build the systems, continuously improve the systems, and then we're building the base skills of the employees, of people and process. That's how we have continuous improvement. Because how can we continuously improve something that hadn't even been improved or defined? You can't. And down at the bottom it says new day, every day. That's really kind of an interesting concept. I equate it to that person walking out and just literally wakes up every day, hasn't learned nothing from the past, and all of a sudden I'm lining up and we're going to put out whatever fire or whatever thing happens to crop up today. So literally it's what we call a new day every day. I haven't learned anything, we haven't defined anything, it's informal, so every day is a new day and a new adventure. Then we look at the awareness. When you gain the understanding of the 4 barriers to quality, you then gain the awareness of why and how all these things are happening to us, not only in our professional life, but in our private life, of really this awareness, and you gain this understanding, this awareness of what's happening and why, that in turn becomes too proactive to fix it before it becomes a problem, because you have an awareness and understanding of the events that are around you. We have people now that have been in the program for 8 or 10 years, and they're saying it's almost like cheating. And I go, well, what do you mean by that? And he's going, I already know what's going to happen, and I already know that deal's doomed. And he goes, I know how to fix it. I know how to prevent that thing from happening. So they're sitting there talking about, let's do this and let's do that. And he goes, I know it's doomed, because we haven't even went through and looked at the 4 barriers to quality. So it becomes very predictable. And so if you look at the formal organization, it's really kind of interesting. The formal organization is really defining those processes, those steps, those procedures, those base work centers, linking them together to create the systems. And in effect, it creates more flexibility. And everybody goes, well, if you're tightening it up with systems, it's less. No, it's not. The reason we're inflexible right now because we don't have nothing defined. So in effect, we're always putting fudge and stuff in there. So if you look at, that's the profile of change. And in effect, let's go to number 2 now. Let's look at the promoting positive communication. If you look at this, our base character, this is what we're saying. We're taking a little different approach on quality other than looking at quality as a process or quality as a business. We're looking at quality as an individual. We're saying quality is throughout people, process, personality. And we're having what we call a base character, promoting those positive communications. Quality of people. It's really interesting. Really, what we're saying is doing the best with what we have. And a quality person tends to keep their thoughts and our emotions under control. And what we're saying there is that we want to gain that control, that self-control. And literally, if there's issues or whatever, let's keep them to ourselves. Because what you'll see is that people don't really want to hear your issues. They're more concerned with their own. So a quality person keeps their thoughts under control, because whether we realize it or not, what we're thinking is who we become. Have you ever noticed, I don't want to have a flat tire, I don't want to have a flat tire, all of a sudden we get a flat tire? Because we're programming ourselves and we're putting that energy out there. And notice that. So let's program ourselves with positive thoughts. Base values. Now this is an interesting thing that we talked about with these base values. We talked about that in the beginning because that's really the foundation of our program. The base values, the foundation of principles and rules that determine conduct and habit, which in turn affect all employees' welfare. A foundation of good decisions. When you're making a decision based off of doing what's morally and ethically correct and treating everybody as you want to be treated, they're going to be good decisions. And they might not be the most popular decision at the time, but believe me, they are the best decision long-term and short-term. Short-term, it might not seem to be the best decision. Long-term, it will be. So if you look at that, the foundation of making good decisions, these base values came into play because of all these things that were happening internally within these organizations. We had to, we're not saying an organization doesn't have it. There's probably very few other than 1% that will disagree with those rules. But what we're saying, if it's not being practiced, we have a tendency to lose it. So we reinforce it, put it in writing, and saying this is what we want internally. And the organization is supporting that. If you look at quality character, now this is really kind of interesting here. It says, myself, having the faith and trust in oneself and in others to endure hardships and or inconvenience without complaint and forgiveness. Forgive, forget, and forge on. Now what we're saying there, forgive and forget. It's like we come across that we have the right to be mean, we have the right to be angry, we have a right to carry a grudge because they've done something bad to us. Don't I have that right? Whether you realize it or not, all that negative stuff, all it's doing is hurting you. That person that has done you wrong, they're all moving on to their next deal. So if you're looking at, by not being able to forgive, you're carrying that sack of rocks around with you and you're throwing another one in there, because if you don't forgive, you're not going to be able to forget the issue. So that issue, what we call that negative imprinting, starts loading up, and all of a sudden all we have is a bunch of negative stuff that's in our subconscious. So we need to forget and forge on. I mean, let's just move ahead. Let's put it behind us and do the best that we can and move ahead. And let's move ahead in a positive manner. Then let's look at, it says patience. Now, this is really something that's interesting. I was probably the last guy in the world that had any patience, but it was fine while I was in sales, and I was the guy that was responsible for myself, and I could get up and be at the office at 4 o'clock, and I could do all this other junk. But when it starts bringing a whole organization around with you, you have to be patient, because everybody in the organization doesn't run at your speed, nor do they think like you. So what you have been spending hours thinking about, they're getting a first brush at it, and depends on where their awareness is how they're going to take it. So you might have to bring them along. And the patience is tested no more than with our children. We got to be patient. Then the patience, we're having tolerance and understandings without malice of oneself and others. What we're saying there is so important with the forgive, forget, move on, that in turn creates self-control. Now, when we have the patience, we're able to forgive, forget, and move on, we have self-control. So that's our quality characteristics. Now let's go down and look at the chart there, that we have the base character and what we call the baseless character. Now what's interesting on here, under this base character, we're asking you to look at the positive, myself. Look at me, myself, as the positive side of it. How is it affecting my base character in a positive manner? I actually have people go, Bruce, I can't be positive, I can't be up, I can't be this, I can't be you. And we're going, it's just as easy to be positive as it is negative. It's just as easy to have a good day as it a bad day. It's totally our decision. Then look over, it says positive in others. How does this positive self-worth radiate to other people? And how do we need to be treating others? Remember the 2 rules. Do what's morally and ethically correct. The foundation of that positive myself, treat others as you'd like to be treated, which is the positive in others, how we're reacting and affecting other people's lives. The baseless character, we're saying negative and positive 1 to 20%. What we're talking about there, remember, 1% affects 5% with the same negative characteristics that in turn affect 20% of the organization. So we're saying as the accountability, the consistency that promotes truth, that promotes trust comes in, and we've showed that over a couple of years, the funnel concept, people start jumping on. And then we're saying, in effect, what they're doing, they're moving from a negative to a positive. So that's why we're putting there. Our goal is to help our people out, not just discount them and throw them over to the side, but help them. And that's where the patience come in. Because a lot of time our people don't understand why they are always month behind on their house payment. They don't ever have the money. They're never happy at work. They're always behind in life and at work. Well, this is a part of that awareness. So let's go down on the first trait there. The first character is that forget. And it goes, what do you mean forget? We're saying, just like what we're doing up there, if something has happened to you, forget, and as we said up there, forget, forgive, and move on. And if you look at the forget, meaning let's discard it, let's get out of it, it becomes forgiveness to others. And not only as we're forgiving others, we're also able to forgive ourselves. And we're able to stop beating ourselves up, because most of the tragedies that we thought in life has never happened to us. What we've done to ourselves mentally and emotionally, we create this thing around us. So if you look at here, and it says the negative, is that the grudge and hateful. So if you look at that, the negative 1%, where we're having forgiveness, they have and carry things as a grudge. That becomes all consuming in their lives. And so all of a sudden, everything is kind of masked with this grudge or with this hatefulness or with this discontent for life or discontent with what I'm doing. And those folks actually become hateful. If you look at number 2, it says humble. My self is basically humbling ourselves to others. And we had some interesting talks a bit ago about how we all really sometimes try to be nice and try to help, but there's always those folks that are mean to us or treat us without respect. We're saying it's really unconditional to serve others. We're getting the win. Every time we're nice to someone, they're mean to us, our character value moves up. And that's where we're saying also we got to forgive, forget, and move on. We got to move through that. If not, we can carry that sack of rocks with us forever, and it's going to do nothing but get bigger. Then we're having, and what's interesting is that we call it, over in the negative side, conceit, a snob, insecure. because the more insecure, the more snobbish that person is, and then the more conceited. You've all seen that pretty boy walking around that think they own the world. The reason they got to be haven't had that projection is because they basically have absolutely no self-worth. So that's the only way they get their self-worth, and they get their self-worth by tearing down others. And we've all seen those slick guys running around talking all that mess. They've been to all these things on how to be too cute and too deceitful to one another. And if you look at number 3 there, it's self-control and patience. If we have self-control, we automatically bring in patience, not for ourselves, but for others. And we're more understanding. On the other side, you look at the baseless character, it's in a hurry and it's short-tempered. Now think about that. Always got another deal, ain't got time to talk to you, ain't got time to do this, I'm moving from one deal to the next. Man, just keep, because that person's out of control. Let's look at number 4, the consistency. This is, again, you're going to see this consistency in myself and way I treat myself and others. Basically, you become trusting to others. And then on the other side, with the negative or the baseless, what we're saying is that it's an extreme. Now remember, what will happen is that no matter what deal you put on the table, they're going to take it to the extreme. They're going to make it what-ifing, sitting on the sidelines, all this other stuff. So that negative characteristic is that it's going to be extreme and it's going to be inconsistent. Reason it's inconsistent, it's going to be whatever benefits them. That's where all that manipulation stuff comes in. Now let's go down to compassion. If you look at compassion, for oneself and one for the others, is that it promotes kindness. And what we're saying, kindness to others. And like I said, is that we give kindness, we don't necessarily get it back, but it builds up our character. On the other side, it's anger and negative rap. And negative rap is that they've never got anything good to say or positive to say about anything or anything, and they're moving from one negative event to the other. Generosity, which is in effect sharing and giving to others. Generosity is giving your good traits, helping people, helping one another, whether it's in one base work center, whether it's at home or what. And the other thing is greed. They never have enough. And that person that's greedy, I guarantee you, is so insecure because that's the only thing that gives them their self-worth. And that in a sense, they never have enough. They will never be happy. They'll go from one greed to the next. They'll get a car, they'll buy a house, the house ain't big enough, they'll get a bigger one, they'll sell it, they'll get a boat, then they'll change business, and each event they believe is going to make them happy or satisfy them, but they will never have enough. And in fact, they'll never have enough because they have nothing. And that's interesting. And let's look at the self-worth. That's what we're talking about, the base character, the self-worth of believing who you are, and in fact you end up not only again respecting you or yourself, but you're respecting others, and others will seek you out. Yeah, we might have that negative 1% over on the other side that's bitter and negative. Have you ever run across that person that's just negative? No matter what positive thing comes up, it's always negative. And no matter what you say or do, they're bitter about life. They're bitter about everything that's happened. And then the next one is work ethic. I don't care what. There's very few of us that have a mama or a daddy that's got enough money to support us the rest of our life where we don't have to have a work ethic. Most of us have to get out there and work. So in advance, not only the work ethic to perform and provide for our families, but also the work ethic to work on all these characteristics, this constant reinforcement. Then, in effect, the work ethic in helping others, not only at work, but helping others, working at helping others. Lazy, avoidance, and excuses. I've seen they spend more time trying to get out of things. If they'd have just done it, they'd been way ahead. E, life lessons. Let's look down at the bottom. The strength and or power of character of a person is not taking advantage of a disadvantage, but giving what's fair. Remember, do what's morally and ethically correct and treat everybody as you want to be treated. If you've got the advantage, there's nothing that gives a bigger win than you doing what's right to that person that you have the advantage on, or that is disadvantage. That's what's building character. You get out of life what you give to others, and what you give comes back in abundance. So you putting out negative stuff, believe me, it's going to come back negative. You put out positive, it's going to return positive, and it's going to return in abundance. You always get more out of it than what you put into it. The better you feel about yourself, the more often you see good in others. And that's exactly right. You feel good about yourself, you're going to feel good about other people. You ever notice when you're not having a good day, no matter what happens, everything's negative? Or you get the greatest news in the world, you get those grades that you wanted in school, not feeling good, it's not that important. Discount it, say, well, I probably could have done better, and I don't even know if I want to finish school anyway. Number 5, positive thoughts promote constructive communication with oneself and others. Whether we realize it or not, our positive and our thoughts really make us who we are. We can't think negative and be a positive person. When you have those negative thoughts come in, try to mentally replace them with a positive. So if you look at the positive thoughts promote constructive communication with oneself and others. Because if you're positive, you're communicating with yourself positive. If you're negative, man, everything is going to be in a negative and a lose. So if you look at, that's our promoting positive communication through quality characteristics. If you look at this next page, we're looking at affirmation. And this was really one of the interesting things, and we even talked about it a little yesterday about the affirmation. And we talked about the affirmation is that we'll put these bullet points up here and then we'll kind of talk about them and come back and fill them in. It says it takes 8 to 9 months to reinforce something as simple as not spitting in public. How can we change an organization habits in 6 months or even 1 year? The path of change is taken a step at a time and measured in miles and months. Basically what that's saying, it's not going to happen overnight. What we were saying here is that I talked about when we lived out in Chickasaw, Alabama, and my mama would take us 3 boys to town, and we were 8, 6, and 5. And for whatever reason, there was a thing going around at that time. And to this day, it's like, don't spit on the sidewalk. Of course, we lived on dirt roads, so we didn't have no sidewalk. So she goes, you boys, when we get downtown, don't you spit on the sidewalk. I don't know why, but that was a button for my mama. Believe it or not, I will not even come close to spitting on anything that resembles concrete now to this day. But my mama literally said that don't spit. So you know what 3 boys are going to do when their mama tells them something like that. We spit on the sidewalk. Of course, she pops us in the back of the head. That's what we call an affirmation. She's reinforcing that we need to change that habit. And if you look at that affirmation, if it takes 6, 8, or 9 months, in order to change a habit as simple as spitting, how in the world are you going to change an organization in a month, in a year, in 2 years? It ain't going to happen. We have to put all these things into place. So if you look at, that's where we're saying the consistency promotes truth, that promotes trust. So if you look at this affirmation, think about it. Something as simple as that, and we're wanting to change an organization. Yes, you'll be able to change the name of your organization. You'll be able to reorganize your organization. You'll be able to paint the trucks the same color. You'll be able to get everybody the same communication equipment. You'll be able to all have Palm palettes or notepads or whatever you want to call it. But really what you're doing, those are the tangible things that are easy. What you're not changing is that other stuff underlying those 4 barriers. So in effect, if we're trying to change our organization, I love those things. Come to this change management thing, and guys, there ain't nothing you're going to do. We've been thrown for 40 years all this stuff that's going to change us overnight. It ain't worked, and it still ain't going to work. So if you look at the affirmation, it's so important of looking at how we're going to change an organization. That's where the consistency promotes truth, promotes trust. Now let's look at number 4, which is tough decisions. If you look at number 4, again, we'll just kind of go over these bullet points to make a tough decision. A tough decision is holding someone accountable. A management is just trying to do what they think the organization wants. If you let somebody slide with the program, it sets the tone. When dealing with tough decisions, deal only with data, not emotion. And what we're saying there, a tough decision is not firing somebody. A tough decision is holding accountable on what we agreed on. That's the tough decision. If you got a salesman that's not processing their work or they're not coming to meetings, but they're the top salesman, we have to hold that person accountable because they're setting tone for the rest of the organization. And what we're saying here, the tough decisions, what we're really looking at is that really management is doing what they think the organization wants. So in effect, all we're doing throughout the organization is everybody's interpreting and trying to do what they think is wanted throughout the organization. And the tough decision is for each of us. The tough decision goes back to these character issues. These tough decisions are forgiving, forgetting, and moving on. And if you let somebody slide, we talked about these double standards, these hidden agendas, because if you let somebody slide, you're doing what we kind of call setting precedents. And what that is that you let somebody slide that now has become a double standard. Or what I say, and there's a story in the book talking about, if you sit there and process, we let somebody do a $200 lunch, it comes through the system. Believe me, everybody in the organization knows that it was a $200 lunch and our budget is only $50. And what you'll see is that throughout this thing in the organization is that it's the same people doing the same thing in the same departments. It's not like all of a sudden one person's going to do something and then all of a sudden this other person. If you see the consistency, when we're looking at the organization from these whether it's character, people, or process, as we start moving away from emotion and getting to data, is that you'll see it'll be the same people that are late for meetings. It'll be the same people that won't make meetings. It'll be the same people that turn in their quarterly reports a quarter late. It's the same people that take phone calls during meetings. It's the same person that's running around through the office that's so busy ain't got time to do nothing. And then all they're doing is creating havoc on everybody else. And this is what we're saying is the tough decisions. What we call it is that I have kind of figured a way out to deal with this, and this is a quality issue, and it's one of our other workshops. If you look at this, we're talking about the workshop of saying, okay guys, look at it. Let's address these issues. Let's put them up there, and let's address the issues and not the personality, or not the issue. I'm sorry, address the issue, but not the personal side of it. That's why this organization, everybody has to participate. When I first started years ago in quality, is that quality was option. You could belong to quality or quality teams or quality circles, and we're saying quality is not an option. Everybody has to participate in the organization. So if you look at it, that's why when you start having these issues, if you've got the owner, the president, the CEO, your department head or division manager, whatever, participating in the program, I know what's going to happen. Somewhere down the road, somebody is going to test the system. Are we going to do what we said we're going to do? Because as you folks now are looking at this thing, you're going, well, yeah, this sounds good. If we were to try it, will it work or will not? If you look at most of the stuff we tried over these last few years, never had the system or the structure to it, and never really addressed the tough issues. They talk about them. The 4 barriers are the tough issues. So when we sit down with this conflict of this person that's trying to manipulate the informal organization, and I go, okay, and I'm going to just say, example, Brian. Brian's the guy here, and Dave is the CEO. I go, you know, Brian, I understand you can't get your paperwork in on time, and you're not going to the meetings. I'm going to ask Dave here. Dave, you're the one that signs all our checks. Are you going to the meetings, or are you participating in the program? And Dave goes, yes, I am. I'm going, okay, now, Brian, I've got a question here. If the guy that signs our check is attending the meetings, turning in their stuff, and participating in the program, can you tell me why you're different? Man, that's why everybody has to participate. When you're looking at this, that's why the whole organization, that's why leadership sets the tone. What we're going to be doing here is that we're going to be taking a break. We kind of covered some deal points that's going to help us in when we get in, coming back from the break, the breaking through lack of communication. So when we come back, we're going to get back in that, and I want y'all to think about everything that we've talked about here. I want you to think about our first class. I want you to think about what we covered in regards to those personal issues and those personal characteristics. And I want you to sit and really think and talk amongst amongst everybody out there, because what I think you'll see is that we got to get you the awareness of these 4 barriers to quality. So we're going to take a little bit of break, think about it, and we'll see you in a few minutes. Thank you.